gone 7 o'clock, and it's time for the Tech Talk, the Power Hour Tech Talk. And this night's talk is going to be hosted by our special guest, ZS6 Fox Yankee, and that's Philip from the Lowveld. And as you might have heard, Philip is going to ask the question, is life too short for QRP? He will also be taking us through some tips and tricks of his experience that he's gained over the many years that he has been operating QRP. And to put it in Philip's words, QRP is a lifestyle. But I don't want to steal all of Philip's thunder. If you want to know a little bit more about Philip, ZS6 Fox Yankee, please go on to QRZ.com and you'll see Philip's profile on QRZ.com. I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us for this evening on the Repeater Network or online on Zoom. And for those that are on the Repeater Network, if you can join on Zoom, you might find it better because the presentation material and the pictures are going to be obviously much easier to see via Zoom. Okay, at this point, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Philip ZS6 Fox Yankee for obliging us this evening, for sharing his knowledge, his story, and his experiences with us as an amateur radio community. Now, Philip, over to you.
Good evening, Keith, and everyone online at the clubhouse there, and anyone who's on the Repeater Network. Yeah, Brandon did a good job at twisting my arm, and I just have to correct you there, Keith. I've not been an operator for too long, but I've had lots of time to think about stuff, try to implement whatever I thought about into my radio, and it kind of worked for me. So I'm sorry for you guys if Keith might have oversold it a little bit with all the contest winning tips. I don't have recipes for you, but I'd just like to share with you, maybe just leave a couple of thoughts for your own evaluation and decisions on whether I make sense or not. Right from the start, I will be honest, I do have a 100-watt radio sitting right in front of me. I love it. It's absolutely beautiful radio. So no, I'm not against QRO radio. I'm not exclusively QRP, but I found QRP radio quite enjoyable and a personal challenge for me. So let me see if I can get this screen shared. I think it's that one, and then I'll have to start. Yeah, start. Okay, can you see the slideshow there, Keith?
Yeah, confirmed. It's QRP radio, it's a lifestyle. Thank you.
Perfect. So that is sort of what I want to talk about, is that a lot of people think, QRP is just something you do for fun. Every now and again, when there's a QRP contest, you go out there and play around a bit with low power and then get back. But if you really want to start getting into QRP radio, it has to become a lifestyle. And like I said, everything I'm saying is open for debate. That's the beauty of ham radio. There's no one right answer, no one wrong answer. Well, some of it's absolutely wrong, but but yeah, it is. If it's something that fits you, if it's something that fits into your lifestyle at the moment, go for it. So I would like to share the following with you, and this is probably the greatest moment in my QRP career. If you look on the G90, right below the little band pass filter there in purple, you'll see there's a power level. So just keep an eye on that for a moment there. Yankee QSL.
Not sure they've got a call. I got a Zulu Sierra 6. I think Zulu Sierra 6 Yankee.
Foxtrot Yankee. Foxtrot Yankee. Florida Yankee. QRP 1 watt. 1 watt.
ZS6 Fox Yankee. Okay, got it. Well, thank you for the passion. Very big, unfortunately. 3x3, I think. 3x3. My name is Alex.
And then obviously, what I enjoy absolutely the most is the reaction that people give you once you tell them you're only using 1 watt. Absolute silence.
Well, I was your signal, but I understand you're using only for one word. It's really great. I think much more better about it, all about 500 watts a speed. And a Yagi antenna. Philip, thank you for contact. Glad to hear you, my friend, with low power. The best wishes, good luck, good deoxys, and I hope to hear you again. And maybe one day with a little better, little stronger when you'll be real strong.
So that was probably the most exciting moment for me in QRP radio. And coincidentally, it happened that this contact actually happened during the very first 1 watt challenge that I hosted, and it absolutely blew my mind. I took a chance. I heard this guy calling, and I answered him. And the question that I sometimes get is, how did it happen? You know, how did you get there? And it was a journey getting there, and I'd like to share a bit about my background. Just maybe so you can get an idea of who I am. You know, I was born and raised in Sandton. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, not that young anymore, matriculated in 2000 and spent some time in the UK after that. Eventually, I managed to finish my master's degree in forestry and natural resources management at Stellenbosch University. And then, yeah, I got married in 2013. I've got 2 little kiddies, 4 and 7. So I've got a very busy family life at the moment with school and sports. And, you know, I just can't get out there every weekend like I'd like to. Received my license in the beginning of May 2022. And it was actually the whole idea of emergency communications that pointed me towards amateur radio, thinking, you know, this is going to be, yeah, you know, not really. I'm not a prepper. Let me just say that now. But, you know, I thought, yes, you know, this is what I'm going to need for comms. And I was quickly brought down to earth when I realized, you know what, it's not just about emergency communications. There's absolutely so much more to ham radio that it took my life in a completely different trajectory. And the first station I started with was a Zygo G90. I'd used some birthday money for that, some bonus money, some saving up, but I got it at the end. And obviously, you know, as you do with the RAE, you actually get your whole station set up before you actually licensed to do so. But I thought, you know, I don't have a lot of space in my house, and what antenna I'm going to use, and this is not the antenna that I used. It's just the depiction of it. But I built myself a 40 to 10 meter end-fed half wave with a coil for 80 meters. And you know what? I started. I thought, yeah, I'm going to get on this radio. I'm going to press that PTT, and people are going to fall over their feet to talk to me. Yeah, it didn't happen that way. There were no pileups, and you know, I thought, something's got to be wrong. Started doing something else, and I tried this and I tried all kinds of stuff. Moved the antenna, moved the radio. I thought maybe it's the ground. You know, all the things you do typically as as someone who's just got his license. And eventually I thought, the thing is power. The G90 is only 20 watts. I need to get more power. This G90 is not really working. I bought myself a dad. And so upgrades had to be the answer. And I got my second radio there. It's an ICOM 729. Lovely radio. She's still sitting here. And I thought, end-fed half wave, maybe not. Let's try something else with lots of planning and swearing and effort. I put up a delta loop over my roof, and to some degree it worked, but not as fantastic as what I thought it would work. So yeah, I was frustrated, and at some point I think I just switched the radio off for a couple of months, and I decided, you know what, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. then I happened to meet two very, very good people, operators, Chris and Adele, Sid and Adele, ZS5 Alpha Yankee Charlie and ZS5 APT. And at that point, their son was living up here in Nelspruit. They came up for a visit and they said to me, well, let's go do a SOTA. So I organized access for them to 3 summits, and I went with them that day, and the SOTA bug bit because I actually made contacts. And I started thinking, but you know what? We're doing this with a little field radio and not that much power. So maybe I'm doing something wrong at home. So I started looking at antennas, and my heads told me, you need to get out the house. And I started working on smaller antennas, lighter antennas, looked at better power options, started learning about activation planning. But I think what was kind of key for me here is that I started working different bands on a more regular basis. And it actually exposed me to way more than just 40 meters that we all know. And I got it into my head, you know what, I've got a little portable G90, take it up, I'll do my SOTAs with it. But let's put it in the car and let's drive it along. When I go for work trips, I do go work trips quite often, and it's normally down to Natal. So there we go. And I was sitting there one day on a work trip to Natal in Howick, and I had just built a link dipole, but it's not very high. It's about 3.5 meters up on a telescopic fishing pole. And I was chatting with Helgi there. Now Helgi, I'm pretty sure all of you know Helgi. He's quite a well-known guy from the Lowveld. He's also, coincidentally, I think he's been running the RAE for over 30 years. So he has a wealth of knowledge. And we had this whole discussion that afternoon. And it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said to me, oh, listen, what power are you using? I said, no, it's 20 watts. Okay, well, maybe try 10 watts. And I dialed down to 10 watts, and we had a nice little chat. And he said to me, well, listen, why don't you go down to 5 watts? Let's just play around. Went down to 5 watts. We actually still had a conversation. And I said to him, wait, let's try 1 watt. And I will never forget the signal report I got from him was a 0.5. And something clicked in my head. And I thought to myself, you know what? Low power can actually work. I don't really need QRO 100 watts to talk to Helgi 450 k's away. So I started thinking, and things started falling in place in my head. And that is actually where the wacky 1 watt challenge was born from, was this whole 1 watt conversation I had with Helgi. And to see how far I can get out, but also to challenge other people in terms of how far can they get out. So this year, 2025, will be the 3rd year that I'm going to be hosting the challenge. I'm not sure if it's going to be the last one. Last year there wasn't a lot of didn't seem to be a lot of interest in it, but I don't know. We'll see what it looks like after the contest. But up to this point, I've had lots of time to think, been lots of time sitting on mountaintops, thinking about stuff. And the question is, what have I learned? And this is what I'd like to share with you tonight. It's maybe it's not rocket science, maybe it's something we all know, but maybe it's something we should just take cognizance of again and just keep in mind. So there's only a couple of things that we can actually really influence when we are running a field station or sitting at home. Transceivers are transceivers, whether they're 1 watt, 100 watt, a true SDX, a 7300, a 7610, FT10DX, whatever. You can't change the radio from what it is. Yeah, sure, you can maybe add a couple of filters here or there, can Mars mod it and open it up, but there's not really anything we can do with a radio. So we're stuck on that end. There are, however, a couple of other places where we can change stuff and make decisions that can really influence what happens to I will say activations or to our deployments of our radios. Antennas. In my mind, QRP radio does not mean QRP antennas. We're going to have a look at that now, and it's something that's close to my heart and something that I'm still learning about. But I think this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They're thinking, oh, it's a small radio, we can get away with a small antenna. You might, but it might not be as good. The other thing we can change are operating conditions. Convenience can be detrimental at times. It would be fantastic if I can just sit at my QTH each contest, somewhere in the yard or on the property here, put up my antenna and operate. But it will mean I'm not going to make as many contacts. And I've got a nice little slide on that, which would be quite interesting for some of you. And then also knowledge. Have you stopped learning after you passed the RAE? I think a lot of us, that's where I think I also fell into a trap where I thought, I've got my license, I know what I'm doing, and I really didn't know what I was doing. So looking at a couple of antennas, I've experimented with a lot of them: end-fed half waves, random wires, loops, linked dipoles, verticals, multibands, and linked verticals. Shameless little plug there. I actually wrote an article on that in the August 23 Radio ZS on building a linked vertical. But I tried a lot of stuff, and for some reason I didn't always get the results I wanted. And that's where I came across two mantras in my antenna arsenal. And the first would be, is the antenna fit for purpose and efficient? And number two is, do I really know that antenna that I'm using? So fit for purpose and efficient, for me, the aim is, especially with QRP radio and where you are actually limited in terms of how much power you have, is to get as much of your power of that low 5 watts or 1 watt onto the wire. So there's a lot of things to consider. Feed line is one. Am I running am I running a balun or anything that might not be efficient enough? So there's lots of things to consider. And something I've learned recently, or what I've started learning, I don't know how many of you know it, but Chris Turner, ZS6 Golf Mike, moved down to White River, and he's been brainwashing us on antennas. But something I learned is that standing wave ratio is not the holy grail of antennas. It is important, don't get me wrong, but when you actually start looking at antennas and impedances of antennas, if you look at the little formula there, Z equals R plus JX. Now R is the impedance of the wire itself, but there's a that JX is actually the reactance. Something I didn't really know until I started learning up on it. But for those of you who might not know, whenever you put current or power in a conductor, you will actually get a magnetic field that develops. Well, that's how our signals are generated. But that magnetic field actually also induces a resistance to current on your wire. And what I've started doing is I've started building my antennas, trying to ignoring SWR for a little bit, but trying to get that reactance as low as possible. And that just means I am more efficient at irradiating the little bit of power that I've got on my wire. And so far, it's been going good. Don't have all the fancy equipment to actually give you definitive measured values, but I think it's going well. I do find, might just also be conditions, but I do find that I am getting out a bit easier at times. And something else that I've also in terms of antennas that I've also realized is that, do you really know the components of your antenna? You can see there's a bunch of cores there that I've wound. This was a December project when the kids were with Oma and Opa. Some of those cores are cores that were bought from Sotabeam. Some were bought locally. There's a pass-through method, as you can see at the very left. That's the one you always see in diagrams. Then we've got the close wound, which is a bit more of a traditional one. There's a very big core right at the end there, and I realized that some of the cores that I bought and that I was using aren't that efficient at matching antennas, and there was a bit of power loss involved in the construction method as well as the construction materials. So yeah, the results have been published. There you are, December 24 in Radio ZS. But the question, the point here is, are you sure that what you are using in your antenna is efficient? So yeah, is it fit for purpose, and is it efficient? Then do you really know your antenna? Are you looking for local contacts, or do you want to DX with it? That will definitely have an influence on your antenna choice. For DX, you'd like one with typically a lower takeoff angle to try and get those longer skips. And a lot of people don't always realize that you can run an end-fed half wave in different configurations, and you'll absolutely get completely different radiation patterns. Bottom left, you'll see it's marked 10 meters end-fed half-wave sloper. So the radio will be on the left-hand side by the Y, and you see there's a little light blue line that runs up to the Z. That is the antenna. So the antenna is sloping up. And on 10 meters, you get a nice little directional cone forming there. And if you didn't know about that and you wanted to work Europe on 10 meters, but you pointed that thing south, you might be able to get a long path, but still, it's not going to be as efficient as it could have been otherwise. If you take that same end-fed half wave as a sloper and you actually set it up as an inverted V, which is the middle picture there. So the radio is still at Y, but now the wire runs up to Z and back down to the minus Y side. You actually get a much more broader radiation pattern, and there's two different takeoff angles. You've got a nice low one, and then this little cloud that sits on top. So, instead of having something that's almost very directional, as in the first case, with that same wire, you can actually get something that's covers a bit more area. So if you don't want to move your radio around a lot, trying to angle or to point that wire somewhere, then maybe that's a better idea. I had the opportunity to play around with an 80-meter loop up at 10 meters last year, June, July, which is the right-hand side. All of a sudden, it's a completely different ballgame where you get a very directional antenna, even though it's just a wire loop. So, do you really know that how your antenna will react, or what the radiation patterns and of your antenna is like, especially if you're using low power? This is going to influence how you are actually going to be deploying your antenna. And I think Brandon also did a talk a little while ago on antennas and deployment. So it's just something that we can change as QRP operators, is to actually know our antennas and our equipment. And I think Keith can tell you the story about last year's QRP contest, where one of the contestants actually doubled the number of QSOs just by changing the antennas, the type of antenna they were using. So yeah, philosophy point number one here is really know your antennas. Go read up, even if you don't have to go read up on or study into antenna theory, but really do know what you're working with. Then operating conditions. These are AI generated images. Let me just put that disclaimer in there. But I think this gives us quite an idea of, especially in South Africa with our different conditions we have, and there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. The one that we all know is on the top left there. We actually love it when a neighbor says they're going to go solar with a nice big fat noisy inverter right next to your tower. So the question then would become, are you going to try and play QRP radio with your neighbor creating so much noise? You already got low power, now you've got to struggle with all the other issues, and trying to get your bit of power out there. So yeah, you can change your operating site and maybe go to the valley, but now you're sitting in the valley. So are you going to try and DX with a low takeoff angle to the left and the right of that valley? Might work, but might not really work. So each of these scenes offer us different things to think about when we're operating portable and with QRP. And it's always good to actually take a note of your surroundings. Now, as I mentioned, this is a nice Google Earth image of where I live. There's my QTH. I'm at about 1,000 meters above sea level. And, it would be nice sitting there and actually just doing contests from there. But it's not that fantastic, to be quite honest. If I move up to the sports field there in the middle, it's at 1,060 meters above sea level. I actually get quite considerable more and better quality contacts. And that is literally 1 kilometer from my house. So by driving or walking that 1 kilometer, I can get a lot more contacts. For field day, I went up to the Kopi, and you see the little inserts there above the sports field. That's the view I have there from the sports field, and then from the Kopi, where I did a field day as well. That was even better. As we move up in altitude, I actually get a better angle across the mountains there, and obviously moving away from a lot of noise as well. And then for the last QRP contest, I went up to the game camp here at the bottom right, and that was absolutely a blast that morning, and absolutely fantastic conditions. Keith, please order conditions like those again for our next contest. I'll pay you some biltong, but it was absolutely a blast. But the convenience of sitting at home, if I would have sat here, I would have not made as many contacts as I did. So convenience is not always good for us. The big catch with this now, is when you actually look at the even bigger picture. Now we've got Ngondwana right there in the middle, and I've actually went and colored in the ridges of all the mountains in red. And I am completely surrounded by mountains. To the north, there's a bit of an opening, so I'm quite all right with getting the UK, parts of the Europe. I can get them quite easily. If I want to do some DX, if you go a bit more to the west, southwest, down the Elands Valley, there's a little bit of a a gap, and to the south as well, just to the left of Kutsia. There's also a bit of a gap for me to get out, but I'm actually struggling to make a lot of contacts to get over these mountains, because where the QTH is at 6,000 meters above sea level. On the Kaapse Hoop side, the top of those ridges are 1,600 meters above sea level. And then on the top left there, that's along Elandshoek or Elandshoogte plantations, that goes up to 2,000 meters above sea level. So operating conditions, you need to actually start thinking about, where am I going to operate from here? In the back of my mind, I know it might not be completely correct, but I believe that if I go and operate either game camp or somewhere there, I have a feeling that some of my signal actually gets reflected up down the Elands Valley or down the Kutsia Valley. And that might be why I'm actually doing better with contests and making contacts from the Kopi or the higher areas than from my QTH, because from my QTH I don't have such a nice a clear field of view down the valley. I might be wrong, but this is something that you can think about. When you go somewhere, is what's the mountains doing? If you're near the sea, just go set up on the beach, throw a counterpoise in the water, and use the saltwater amplifier. So where you are operating from is definitely something we can change, and something that we need to explore and try and get our heads around that, instead of just trying to sit at one spot and working from there all the time. Then the other thing that we can change, the third thing, is knowledge. I mean, don't really stop learning after you got your license. Amateur radio is a collective term. This is just sort of my idea of it, and it includes a lot of topics from a lot of sub-interests. And the more we understand about these little things that influences amateur radio, the better our chances of success. So a couple of ideas there that I want to just quickly touch on before we actually going to be finished. So I'm just about 6 more slides left. But space weather. Guys, how well do you know your space weather? Do you know what the solar cycle is? Solar cycle 25, top right. We can actually see the solar flux units there being higher than expected. So conditions like these, absolutely brilliant for QRP radio. It gives us a nice big overview of what's going on in the longer term, but what's happening right now. Because I mean, I'm not really wanting to know what's happened yesterday, the day before, or what the forecast says. So there's a website called Solar Weather Now, I think, or Solar Weather Live, and that's the bottom right, the two bottom right pictures there, giving us an idea of solar flares that's happening right now. How big are they? Are there any radio blackouts? If you look at the DUF map there, which bands are affected? Where is it affected? Because, you're sitting out there in field and you're calling CQ, and you're getting tired, and you're calling CQ, and no one's answering, and you're getting hurtful. And you know what? If you open up the app, or you open it and say, oh my word, we just had an X-class flare, there's absolutely no radio, I might just as well pack up and go home. And it saves you from sitting there and getting frustrated and saying, but you know what, QRP radio is some nonsense, let's just leave it. So do you really know your space weather? We've all seen the banners on the left hand side. I've actually coincidentally came across the one there from 2019, which is the 14th of December 2019. It's the right hand side of those two banners. And if you look at those two, on which days would you like to go out and play QRP radio? the 2025 or 2029. It actually well, it also happens that the 2029 one was right in the middle of our last solar minimum. And then, do you really understand every little metric that's given there? What is SFI? What is a 304A? The K index or the B sub Z? And I think these are things that aren't necessarily taught in RAE, but it's definitely something that we need to learn and be aware of for us to be quite successful with QRP radio. And another thing that we're not really taught in the RAE and that you sort of pick up afterwards is propagation. Now, these are propagation models for 10 meters. And I took these screenshots a couple of days ago, and these are models. Now, all models are wrong. Some are just useful. And if you as a new operator weren't aware of how the 10-meter band, for instance, changes during the day, you'd likely try and sit there on the top left early morning, let's say 11 o'clock, trying to call America, when you're not going to get through to them. You're only going to start getting through to them around about maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And just by sitting and running through these models, just for interest's sake, you get an idea of what is the 10-meter band going to do during the day right now, because obviously it's going to change between seasons as well. So the more you learn about predicted possibilities and predicted propagation possibilities, I think the better and the more successful you will also become with QRP radio, and stop wasting a lot of effort to try and get through to somewhere at a time when you're most probably not going to be able to get through. That being said, you do get some crazy days. I found that with the last couple of big solar storms that we had, the one June, July last year, there was a big one. And the day after that, the bands are literally all over the place, and you'd be surprised where you can get out. So keeping an eye on things like big solar storms will actually give you an indication of when you actually should go out and play QRP radio if you wanna have a nice little surprise. And then something that I think is also good for QRP radio to be successful would be you need to be prepared. You need to do some planning. You can't just run out there and say, "Here I am, world. I'm with my 10 watts. I'm going to be chatting with you." There's a bunch of programs out there like SOTA, POTA, WWFF, Heritage on the Air, Parks on the Air, where you can actually spot your activations. So we all know that self-spotting on a DX cluster is not always is a bit frowned upon. But these are programs where it gets you out into areas where you can operate very nicely away from noise. And you can actually tell people, "Here I am, come talk to me." Part of the planning is, whenever I go somewhere, the top left, that Google Earth image, I've actually got all the summits in South Africa on my Google Earth on my phone. So I can just open it up and say, "Hey, there's a summit close by. I've got my radio. Let's go." If you're clever enough and you do some planning on the bottom left, Marshberg there, it's up near Leidenburg, you can actually drive right up to that summit and go operate there. So if you're going past there and you've got some time, you know about it, hey, go and do it. So it takes some planning. Otherwise, you get there, you're not really prepared. You don't have an idea of what's going on with solar weather, what the sun's doing. You're there at the wrong time, and you can get there and walk all the way through the veld instead of driving up there. So Yeah, there is some planning involved, but in the end, it's actually going to be quite worth it. A couple more planning tools that I use, for instance, would be Ham GPS, which is an app that's actually that's free to download, and it's just very useful. When I need to determine where north is, if I want to look at how am I going to orientate my my antenna, Ham GPS is absolutely perfect for that. Thinking about logging, I mean, you don't always think about it, but being able to just log your contacts more easily makes life so much more fun while you're out on a portable station. I use VK Portalog. It is a logging app that was specifically written for SOTA, but they have changed it as well. You can use it for portable logging. And what is fantastic about it, you download your log as a CSV or as an ADA file, upload it where you want it, and you don't have to use paper. Make sure you've got enough battery power, but but it just makes life so much easier, and it makes your portable station so much nicer. And if you feel good, then your station will hopefully also be doing good. Other apps that I use, for instance, with a QRP contest is FT8 Charlie November. And it's a little Android app that was written specifically to run FT8 from an Android phone. I don't need to carry a big backpack up a mountain and then go sit there when I'm tired, pull out my big laptop and try and get stuff hooked up. And yeah, you know what? Now it's easy. Open up your phone, plug it into the radio, into the DigiRig. I use a DigiRig mobile as an interface, and off I go. I can actually get more contacts on low power by using FT8. And I know FT8 is the, yeah, sometimes it might be a curse word for some, but you know what? If it's there, use it. And then also, a lot of people don't really know about this, but QRPcluster.com is a free spotting cluster where you are actually encouraged as a QRP operator to go spot your station or your activation or your activities. It's specifically for us as QRP operators to get our message out there. And I found that there's quite a couple of guys with QRO rigs out there that will monitor this, and they will actually try and chase you. So it's always worthwhile checking out qrpcluster.com and using that as part of your tools. And moving a little bit away from the hardware side and the antenna side, is we really, as a QRP operator, you need to know yourself. You get lost in QRP radio very, very, very easily. My very first field station was up in Lydenburg with a gentleman, and he told me, you know what, moet nooit broodgeld vir radio's gebruik nie. Jou familie kom eerste. And it wasn't just about the money. I think we all remember in the HF assessment, the practical bit, we've got the characteristics of a good ham in the front. And the irony of of it all is that this gentleman who told me to, that your family comes first, he actually got divorced because of radios. But with all radios, especially with QRP, because once that bug's bitten, my mate, I've now, when was it, a couple of days ago, I've had the comment from someone, especially after the last contest, that said, you know, he's so amped for QRP radio, and you know what, fantastic, go for it, but always remember your family comes first. Otherwise, what's the use of doing radio? Then know your strengths and your weaknesses, guys. It's something that we don't always want to admit and say we don't know something, but we're here to help each other. and don't be scared to ask for help, and don't be stingy with answers. You know, it's a QRP radio is a whole subset of amateur radio where whatever we learn with QRP radio is actually is scalable, and you just take it up to your QRO rigs, and it will work. You know, you try different stuff, you try different antennas, you get these weird ideas which you can actually quite easily experiment with on low power, so you're not in danger of blowing up a very expensive radio. But if it works and you can scale it up to work for your full power radio, why not? It's absolutely fantastic. Also, guys, don't be afraid to cut your losses and fail. I had a bit of an epic failure with the last contest. I specifically rebuilt the 10-meter beam because I thought, hey, I'm gonna be doing quite well, and the beam absolutely failed on me, and I lost 30 minutes of a contest. You know what? It happens. It's just one of those things. You learn, we adapt, we go on, and uh, yeah, you need to be able to make good decisions on the fly there. But just to give you an idea, cut your losses. I should have just stopped and just gone back to 20 meters. I might have made a couple more contacts. I actually had a chat with Brandon afterwards, and I think the points difference between us on the raw scores is about 20 points. Now, he spent an hour on the 10-meter band trying to make DX contacts. He made one contact with a guy in Belgium, I think. Well, I made two contacts, but one of them was to Belgium. I made no 10-meter contacts, but I made about 4 or 5 times more. Well, not 4 or 5, but I made double or triple the amount of contacts he had on 20 meters. But he made the decision to go to 10. He got someone there, and the distance multiplier gave him more points than me. So yeah, I should have just cut my losses and gone back to 20 and maybe worked a bit more stations, and I would have had the 20 extra points. But you know what? We learn. And it's just, don't give up. Don't give up. With QRP radio, there are days you will get so frustrated that jy sê ek gaan hierdie goed nou oppak en ek gaan nooit weer aan 'n radio vat nie. Ek wil niks weet nie. You go back home, jy's omgekrap, die hond gaan kruip weg. Vrou bring vir jou 'n koppie koffie en jy gaan sit net op die stoep en jy doen niks. So yes, you will get frustrated, guys. It's part of QRP radio. But there will be fantastic days, absolutely brilliant days. And whenever I have a bad day, I think back to my QSO with Alex, and you know what, it will get better. And then just to end off with, guys, you do you. The band is broad. There's a lot of opinions out there on QRP radio. A lot of people are in stages of their lives where they don't want to mess about with what we're talking about. They don't want to experiment with antennas. They don't, they don't have time for it. But that's fine. Let us give each other their space. If you think of Peter Parker, VK3 Yankee Echo, I don't know, most of you have probably seen his YouTube videos. He's quite a character, walking around barefoot with all these little McGafters and things that he's built, but he absolutely is one of probably the most inspiring QRP operators for me out there. He's doing what he's doing. He's enjoying it. It's for himself, and he doesn't care what anyone else says. And that is sort of where it comes in, where QRP is a lifestyle. You need to think about things constantly. Consider where will we be operating. Can I improve something on my antenna? Can I do something here? What about setting up a field station in the next town over? Or so there's no right or wrong. There's no recipe for winning contests in QRP. QRP is a lifestyle that you got to live and that you got to learn from. So never stop learning, never stop experimenting, never stop trying. Always have fun. And remember, QRP radio, it's a lifestyle. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philip. That was a very well constructed and very interesting presentation from my perspective. And I know we've got a few people online and we've got a few people sitting around me here. We're also on RF, and apparently, sorry to those on RF, the Echo link did drop off for a while there, but I hope that we're back and you can picked up. We will be publishing the video on the YouTube channel, so you're welcome to go and have a look at that YouTube channel as well once we've published it.